Revealed, the sinister death game that left 12 haunted souls cursed and terrified forever. Every horror story you've heard about Springfield pales next to the sinister truth. That night, Sarah stumbled into the unknown, drawn by desperation. She was a single mother juggling care for her 2 kids, Max and Ellie, barely scraping by on tips from night shifts at a rundown diner. But when the invitation slid beneath the greasy door, the feeling of doom slithered around her heart like a snake. It promised a fresh start, a large cash prize. Little did she know, it also offered a one-way ticket into a game designed to expose her deepest fears. As Sarah stepped into the nondescript warehouse, her senses screamed to turn back. The air felt thick, stale and suffocating, like 100 whispers pressed against her ears. A masked figure loomed in the shadows, pacing like a predator watching its prey. Each participant's eyes darted between hope and dread, reflecting their own hidden traumas. Sarah felt the weight of judgment as she stood among strangers, all trapped in a web of vulnerabilities, ready to be pulled apart. The ominous host began the game with a chilling smile, revealing their knowledge of each player's darkest secrets. "Face your demons, or they'll consume you," they intoned, sending shivers racing down Sarah's spine. She wanted to scream, to run, but the unrelenting thought of Ellie and Max echoed in her mind. She pushed forward as a voice unconsciously warned her, "Don't trust the darkness." Panic erupted when one participant fell to the floor, lifeless and bloody, eyes wide with terror. The feeling of terror was contagious. Even the walls seemed to close in. Fear rippled through the crowd, a living thing, pulsing with the reality that this was not a game, it was a grotesque dance of revelation and death. Sarah's heart raced. Reality was no longer a comforting shield. The atmosphere shifted, alliances formed, only to shatter with every revealing confession. The twisted game forced Sarah to confront her sacrifices. In fractured memories, she saw the ghost of her husband, a reminder of what she had lost. As horrifying whispers filled the room, she couldn't escape a local legend about a cursed community, buried beneath layers of manicured lawns and friendly waves. The clock ticked on, and with it, the darkness in the room swelled, escalating the tension to a breaking point. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every confession and every revelation, trust fractured like glass under a hammer. The realization rippled through Sarah as she realized the chances of betrayal grew with each passing minute. The local authorities whispered in her ear, and she understood they were part of the shadows that clung to the game. Fear transformed into resolve as she plotted her escape, knowing that her children were at home, waiting for her. The night grew darker, the tension thicker, and as whispers of betrayal filled the air, she determined to flee with Max and Ellie before everything collapsed. Just as she thought freedom was within reach, a familiar face emerged from the darkness, a face she thought she could trust. Her heart raced, a mix of terror and betrayal pooling in her stomach. Who would survive this night? Who were the real monsters, the players in the game or the darkness that festered within their community? What secrets loomed just beyond her grasp, threatening to pull her under before dawn could break? Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears as she locked eyes with the familiar figure emerging from the shadows. Jacob, her late husband's best friend, stood before her, the mask of the host now hanging loosely at his side. Confusion and fear twisted in her gut. What was he doing here? She had once trusted him, had relied on him during those dark days after the accident. Now, his presence felt like a noose tightening around her throat. "Sarah," he said, voice low and trembling, "we need to get out of here." Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but she felt rooted to the spot, a deer caught in the headlights. Behind Jacob, she could see the others shifting uneasily, their fear morphing into paranoia. Conversations murmured into whispers, a cacophony of suspicion. Sarah's throat tightened as she recalled Jacob's words before everything spiraled out of control. no one can be trusted after the darkness takes hold. Suddenly, the room flickered, the dim lights battling against the encroaching shadows. The host moved, his back towards them, hands clasped as if conducting an orchestra of dread. "Betrayal leads to hell," he announced, his voice ricocheting off the cold walls. "You must choose wisely." Sarah's heart raced. The horror of what unraveled next gripped her as she noticed one participant trembling in fear, their face pale, eyes darting around as if they were seeing hell itself. Then that person pointed a finger at Jacob. "He's one of them." The terrified shout shattered the growing tension like glass, the room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew, harsh whispers swirling like a storm. Jacob's approach felt more ominous than before, a predator wearing a familiar face, and doubt clung to Sarah. Unease gnawed at her, the pieces of a horrific puzzle colliding in her mind. Was he here to save her, or was he the very knife that would cut her throat? "Sarah, listen to me." Jacob moved closer, desperation etched across his features. "I didn't want to get involved. They forced me to play this role. Trust me, I can help you." But could she? Panic clawed at her insides as she remembered the one truth about survival: desperate measures can lead to deadly mistakes. "Why should I trust you?" she hissed, voice low. "This is a setup." "No." Jacob's voice filled with frantic urgency. "This isn't just a game. They used me to lure you in. We've all been trapped, used against one another." Before she could answer, another contestant screamed. They collapsed, a blood-curdling cry filling the air as darkness swallowed them whole. Torn between instincts, Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. The host smiled wider, the feast of chaos simmering around him. "Only one can walk free," he declared, and the room crackled with the sound of an electric tension, rotting trust like fruit turning to ash. Sarah stood at the edge of a precipice. Her heart thrummed wildly. This wasn't just a game, it was a desperate scramble for survival, betrayal lurking in every thread of terror that bound them together. Would she put her faith in Jacob, a face from her past, or trust her gut and flee into the unknown? As shadows danced and anticipation thickened, a shout echoed through the warehouse, one final warning that cut through the noise. "The clock is ticking. Choose wisely or lose everything." Just then, a door creaked open, revealing a path shrouded in darkness. Would escape be as sweet as freedom or as deadly as the truths they all hid? Sarah felt the weight of choices bearing down on her as she sensed something lurking behind that door, waiting to claim another soul. What lay beyond was a nightmare designed to shatter the last remnants of hope. Would her chase for survival reveal the true monsters in the game? Or would it lead her straight into the arms of the ultimate terror? That door loomed ahead, an abyss waiting to swallow her whole. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. Behind her, the cacophony intensified, shouts blending with weeping, the scent of fear thickening the air. She had always believed she could differentiate between right and wrong, good and evil. But now she felt blurred lines, desperate shadows curling at the edges of her conscience. The darkness was drumming louder, pounding in her ears. Jacob's grip tightened on her arm, anchoring her. "We have to go." His urgency dripped with something raw, something desperate. "What if you're lying?" she snapped, panic twisting her voice. The idea of trusting him felt like contemplating a leap into a pit of enemies. "I'm not." Jacob pleaded, his gaze burning into hers. "They'll only kill us all if we stay. This isn't just a game, it's a slaughterhouse. That host is feeding off our fear. We can't let him win." Their eyes locked. She searched for betrayal, for the slightest glint of malice. The second stretched like thick fog, her instincts warring with the broken trust that once defined their relationship. Then, someone shrieked from the crowd. A figure staggered back, their mouth gaping in terror. "He's coming. He knows." A chill crept down Sarah's spine. The host had shifted, almost imperceptibly, muscles coiling like a snake's, his eyes now looking directly at them, glinting with predatory delight. "Choose." Choose. Or face the consequences. He taunted, voice dripping with sick pleasure. Overwhelmed, Sarah turned towards the open door. Whatever lay hidden in that darkness might be better than this hell of accusations. Come on. She urged, pulling Jacob closer, tearing her eyes away from the impending doom radiating from the host. But footsteps echoed behind them, a stampede of panic. People erupted toward the doorway in a frenzy, desperate for escape. Sarah felt the weight of each individual weight as bodies collided, shoving her off balance. Sarah! Jacob's voice cut through the chaos as he tugged her back. No. Wait. The door was an exit and a predator, both. The hall beyond yawned, crawling with shadows. A single bulb flickered above, like a star fighting against the void in a universe of dread. If we go in there, we might well die here if we stay. She screamed over his fear. But before she could take another step, the host boomed through the chaos. One will have to pay the price. A reckoning awaits. Screams erupted anew, fractals of terror slicing through the warehouse, visceral and cold. One by one, people were dragged to the center by an unseen force. A brutal game of sacrifice was unfolding. One person stepped forward, their eyes vast pools of despair, offering up a gun. An impossible choice presented among the desperation. Sarah's heart sank. The band of humanity had dissolved into something monstrous, a twisted version of survival. What will they do? She gasped, turning back to Jacob. But he was wide-eyed, transfixed by the terror blossoming before them, and his silence sent tendrils of dread coiling around her heart. Listen to me, we can't let it be us, he stammered, fear stripping his facade bare. Panic twisted his voice. We have to make a choice. It's us or them. Make a choice. Sarah's mind spun. To kill or to die. A rancid odor filled her nostrils. The scent of blood and sweat. That choice could fracture more than her own life, it could swallow her soul whole. The clock ticked louder, a reminder of their mortality ticking away within the claustrophobic dread of the warehouse. Just as Sarah thought she could no longer bear the weight of the pending decision, the door to the darkness creaked wider. In that instant, she realized something chilling: there was no escape until the circles of hell burned through trust, love, and ultimately each other. As a figure blurred out of the darkness beyond that door, a new terror whispered in the air. Whatever you choose, it'll change everything, forever. The promise hung thick with dread, and with that, fear anchored itself deeper into Sarah's gut. Would she have the courage to face the storm ahead, or would she be swallowed whole by the dark designs ahead? The air shifted, cold and heavy, as the figure stepped into the feeble light. It was clad in a tattered coat, shadows draped over its features like a second skin. Sarah felt her breath hitch again, a hot ball of panic pressing up into her throat. What, who are you? She managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure raised its head slowly, revealing hollow cheeks and eyes that shimmered with something unnatural hunger. I am the key to your salvation, it said, voice hollow yet inviting. Or your undoing. Jacob instinctively stepped closer to Sarah, his body a barrier against whatever horror this was. We don't need your help. He snapped, brave words cloaked in trembling fear. Oh, but you do. The voice sang, cruel and taunting. You are already entangled in the web of fate. In the background, the frenzied crowd churned like a tempest, their anguish spilling into the space, a visceral tide ebbing and swelling with every beat of dread. They need a sacrifice, the figure continued, fingers clawing through the dark air. A willing participant to tilt the balance. Sarah could see the madness in the crowd's eyes, feel their desperation clawing at her own consciousness. They were alive, but terrified. A festering horror lurked inside them all. Who would you assign? The figure pressed, tilting its head as if savoring the agony it would unleash. Choose wisely, it's not just your life at stake. A chill wrapped around Sarah, icy fingers of guilt and fear intertwining. She caught someone a stranger, but their face held only resignation, as if they accepted death before the game truly began. Is this how it ends? She thought, heart racing. Is this really the only way to escape? Jacob breathed heavily beside her. Don't listen to it, he whispered urgently, teeth grinding. You know we don't have to do this. The entity laughed softly, a sound like rustling leaves scraping against stone. Ah, but what if you are already part of it? What if all this has been leading you here? Each choice made in fear, dragging you deeper into the dark. The air thickened. The shadows loomed longer, darker, curling around them like vines. Each whisper from the audience pricked at Sarah's skin. You could end the suffering, it beckoned, its voice seeping into her mind. It can be you or the ones you love. Suddenly, the crowd surged forth again, panic igniting. Someone screamed for help as they were pulled towards the host, dread spilling into chaos. The gun clattered to the ground, a metallic echo freezing time, one less person to make a choice. Sarah! Jacob shouted, desperation nodding in his voice. Run! We have to get out. But the choice hung between them like a dagger. Someone had to stand, had to sacrifice. The shadows pulsed with dark laughter, feeding on their fear, whispering lies. You cannot run from fate. Then, Sarah felt it, a surge of anger breaking through the fear. No. I won, she declared, finding strength in the chaos. But darkness seeped closer, wrapping around her heart, urging her to let go, to accept the easy path to survival. Choices had never felt so sinister, and as the eerie figure grinned wide, revealing jagged teeth, the door behind them began to close slowly, the inky darkness threatening to swallow everything else in the warehouse. Jacob's hand tightened around hers. Stay with me, he said, eyes wide with fear. We'll face it together. But shadows crawled closer, the weight of choices pressing down. Would she dare to choose? Would she reject the darkness, or would terror drive them down the path of damnation? As uncertainty gnawed at her resolve, Sarah felt that they needed a way out, a decision that could save them all or cost everything. The door to darkness pulled tighter, and the sinister host began to take a step forward, their time running out. What awaited on the other side of that threshold? Would they find hope, or discover the true meaning of horror? The darkness thickened, pressing against them like a living thing. Sarah's heart raced. She could feel Jacob's grip close around her hand, his warmth a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching terror. But would that hope drive them to safety, or lead them to doom? No, we can't. Jacob gasped, backing away from the figure. But the shadows seemed to pull tighter, wrapping around his ankles, holding him down. Panic glinted in his eyes. We need to make a choice. The haunting figure took a slow, deliberate step closer, the darkness swirling about its feet. You see. The fear is already consuming you. Embrace it. Its voice oozed malice, taunting. Behind them, someone in the crowd shrieked, a high-pitched, desperate cry that sliced through the night like a knife. The sound shattered the moment's tense silence, awakening the congregation's hysteria, igniting them like a powder keg. The forsaken folk surged forward, faces twisted by despair and madness. Their voices blended into a chaotic symphony of terror, begging for salvation that was never meant to come. Sarah, think. Jacob's voice cracked. There has to be another way. He struggled against the grip of the shadows, foot by foot inching backward, but the darkness only seemed to thicken around him, dragging him closer to the heart of the malevolence. Is this how you repay your love? Hissed the specter, its eyes shimmering, claws ready to dig into the fabric of their shared reality. Will you choose him, or will you dare select another soul to take his place? A wave of churning, bitter rage swelled within Sarah. She was faced with a choice that was never truly hers. The pulse of the shadows echoed in her mind, sacrifice or be sacrificed. What if there was no escape? What if their efforts only sealed their fate? The crowd roared, a clamoring sea of desperate faces, each one reflecting the fear of their shared nightmare. They begged silently, hoping someone would break first, a martyr to quell their collective dread. Let them all die. Someone bellowed from the frenzy, eyes wild as they clawed at the air. This is the only way. An icy numbness spread through Sarah as the figure reached an eerily delicate hand to her. Your heart beats with despair. Show me your sacrifice, and perhaps you'll break free of this torment. No. Jacob shouted. Please don't listen. The pressure mounted. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Every breath seemed to darken with the weight of a decision. The door behind began to recede, the shadows creeping into their sanctuary. In that moment, the malevolent voice whispered low and smooth, curling around her thoughts. To save him, choose another. To love is to let go. She felt it, a tug in her soul, a bond threatening to shatter. What would Jacob say? Would he want her to choose? The answer swirled within the chaos of her thoughts. With a surge of defiance, Sarah screamed, "No more." The crowd hushed instantly. All eyes turned to her, expectations swirling like a tempest. The figure paused, its smile widening, revealing more jagged teeth than she could count. Ah, you choose defiance. Brave, foolish. But before she could grasp the weight of her defiance, a blaring scream erupted from the back of the warehouse, freezing her blood. A woman stood, wide-eyed and trembling, arms flailing against an unseen force that yanked her into the crowd. Stop! Help me! Her screams were swallowed, lost amidst the chaos. Panic surged anew. They had to act, but the choice remained a dark, twisted game that broiled within the shadows. Choose. Save him or choose another. The figure's voice crashed like thunder, shattering the moment of silence. As Sarah's gaze darted from Jacob's pleading eyes back to the seething crowd, she knew they were out of time. The door of darkness had begun to close with jagged teeth, and the specter had resumed its ominous march. What if refusing the choice condemned them all? Would one life be enough to break the cycle? With a breath that scorched her lungs, she shouted, "We need a plan." But as more screams filled the air, Sarah knew they were balancing on the edge of oblivion. The next moment could bring salvation or seal their fate forever. What lay beyond the door, and who would choose to step through next? The tremors of fear coursed through the crowd like a live wire sparking chaos. Faces twisted in horror, each person still locked in their individual battle against despair. Sarah's heart pounded louder than the frantic screams, a rapidly escalating drumroll of dread. Focus. Jacob's voice cut through the panic. His grip tightened around her hand, a desperate lifeline. We need to think of something fast. Her mind raced. The shadows were alive, creeping closer, wielding influence over the crowd. In that moment, clarity pierced through the cacophony. A fragmented memory surfaced, a tale told in whispered tones, passed down through generations. Those who feed the darkness do not disappear, they merely become its thralls. But how? What could they sacrifice? Jacob! She cried, the urgency in her voice brittle. What if we gave it the anger? The fear? Those people know. They don't deserve to be consumed. He shoved a hand through his hair, pulling at the strands in frustration. They're like us. Lost. We can't hand them over. The specter flickered at the periphery of her vision, disdain dancing in its eyes. What is this? A dwindling resolve? Such delightful entertainment, its smile widened, sadistic, joyous in the unfolding torment. The crowd seemed caught between waves of panic, a grotesque dance of uncertainty. Distract it. Sarah yelled suddenly. Create a diversion. We need to draw its attention away. We. Jacob blinked, disbelief etched across his brow. Yes, if we can grab its focus, maybe we can run for it. She threw a glance to the shadows swallowing the edges of the warehouse, closing in like a hungry beast. They'll die if we do nothing. Mustering every ounce of courage, Jacob nodded, hurriedly urging the crowd to act. We need to fight, right now. Stir up your anger. Scream against it. A handful took up the call, voices rising, but many remained frozen, lost to their fears. The spectre's sinister laughter sliced through their cries. It relished in this chaos, hands weaving through the dark tendrils, feeding on the terror that blanketed them all. In this moment of uprising, she could see at the flicker of resolve in some faces, an ember of defiance. Yes. Be brave. You want out. Rage against it. Sarah joined in, her throat raw, words spilling like flame. An erratic ripple shot through the crowd as one man pushed forward, stepping out of the throng. You think we'll kneel to something so vile? He shouted, bring it on. With his declaration, momentum surged. The crowd, once paralyzed, began to join in, primal cries filling the air like a tempest. The shadows writhed, drawn toward their collective fury, facing the wave of defiance. Fools! The spectre shrieked, its voice high and shrill. Your wrath will not save you. But the darkness hesitated, drawing back, as if unsure how to penetrate this newfound strength. Sarah locked eyes with Jacob, bolstered by the rising tension. Now. We run. Just then, a howl erupted from the back, a piercing sound that silenced every voice. A form spun into view, tangled in shadows, the woman from earlier. She thrashed helplessly, face twisted in terror, eyes wide and wild as the darkness constricted her. Help me! She screamed. A paralyzing dread gripped Sarah. Here they were, summoned to choose life or death, but now they were faced with an even darker choice: to leave someone behind. Jacob, she started, but he was already moving, rushing forward, plunging into the mass of twisting darkness. Stay back! He yelled, reaching for the woman, but tendrils snapped in response, wrapping around him like a venomous snake. No! Sarah's voice rose to a shattering crescendo, heart seizing with horror. We can't lose you both. In this moment of urgency, the crowd held its breath. Would Jacob surrender to salvation, or would he join the cursed? As the dark tendrils pulled, Sarah felt another wave of fear roll heavy in her stomach. Would she have to sacrifice the very person she loved to save a stranger? Would anyone be free? The shadows stretched, almost eager, and she realized this darkness demanded a high price: an insatiable craving for the terror inherent in loss. Choose, the spectre whispered, twisting its hand through the air like a conductor summoning despair. Sarah pressed her hands to her head, fighting against the dreadful hold the spectre had over her mind. Gripped by doubt, she blurted, what if we all choose to fight? But there was no time to think longer. Just as one decision rippled across the crowd, Sarah heard the door to darkness creaking, something dark and forsaken rattling behind it. The moment for choosing was slipping, and terror clawed at her insides. What if this was the end, a mere prelude to something far worse? In that instant, fear solidified around her heart. They needed to escape or perish altogether, but which path would they choose in the face of impending doom? A tempest threaded through the shadows as Sarah stood there, clutching Jacob's hand tighter than ever. Would defiance hold the answer, or would it drag them all down into the abyss? As the darkness began to close in again, one thing became clear: the next move would shatter them all, or lead to desperate salvation. The tenuous grip of hope shattered around Sarah, leaving nothing but fear in its place. Shadows seemed to laugh, a cacophony of sinuous whispers swirling around her ears, taunting both her and Jacob. Jacob! She screamed, her voice barely breaking through the demonic symphony, panic rising in her throat like bile. You can't just. He was already trapped, tendrils twisting tightly around his arms, pulling him deeper into the vortex of inky darkness. It coiled with a grotesque hunger, eager to engulf him whole. The remaining crowd watched in paralyzed horror, their fresh resolve slowly dimming as the spectre's grip tightened. Run! Jacob shouted, his voice strained, a mere echo behind him. The fleeting spark in his eyes tried to relay his desperate plea, but the shadows fluttered like wings, consuming that flicker fast. No! Sarah fought against the urge to bolt. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to flee with the others who, even now, were inching toward the exit, their faces pallid with dread. But she couldn't leave him. They couldn't afford to lose anyone to this monster. Get out. Jacob's voice rang with urgency, breaking into her whirlwind of thoughts. You have to go. The woman still struggled, gnashing her teeth as the darkness constricted. Help me. She begged, her voice trembling under the weight of her doom. Time fractured around Sarah. Lapped in inaction, it felt like minutes stretched into eternities. An idea, half-formed and reckless, pierced through the fog. Together. She yelled, turning to the crowd, desperation spilling from her lips. If we all fight, if we channel everything we have, our anger, our fear, all of it, we can save them. For a brief moment, their eyes flickered with uncertainty, but the specter's cackling swirled, pulling them back into despair. Shadows shimmered like oil on water at the edge of her vision, mockingly waiting. Who will join me? Something stirred in the crowd. A middle-aged man stepped forward, defiance igniting the lines of his face. I can't watch them die. We fight. One after another, others joined his stand, voices rising in fierce unity. Yet it felt like a tenuous thread, wavering against the wind's merciless pull. Now. Focus on the darkness, not just Jacob and that woman. Together, scream with all your might. As screams erupted, a tempest of sound and fury vibrations thundered through the warehouse. The darkness reeled, ripping tendrils from Jacob's body, surprise dancing across the chilling presence. But this was no dance of freedom, it was a desperate act against the sinister force that reveled in their fear. Close your eyes. Sarah cried out, her own heart racing as she forged ahead, arms extended. Visualize the light. The shadows retreated momentarily, gnashing in fury, their growls resonating, deep and guttural. An opening, bare and vast, swelled into view, revealing a glimmer of light far beyond. Now! Sarah shouted, pushing past the throng, her heart laced with dread as she reached for Jacob. With a surge of will, she pulled him, fighting against the darkness swarming around him like an army of lost souls, but the darkness clawed back, hissing, You think you can win? Together. The crowd roared, the sound reverberating through the very foundation of despair, until the shadows that had once held them captive recoiled in fury. In that moment, Sarah felt the camaraderie, that fading connection stitch itself back together, tethering them to each other against the void. But just as they pressed ahead, the shadows shimmered ominously, pulsing with renewed ferocity. A rumble echoed, the very ground shook beneath them. A vision of twisted faces flooded into view, lost souls clawing desperately for the warmth of life, straining to escape, feeding the specter's insatiable hunger. Sarah! Now! Jacob wrenched her back, diverting her gaze to the churning mass. Dark figures began emerging from the depths, faces contorted in agony. There was no denying it now, the darkness wasn't just sorrow, it hungered for their very souls. No! A woman screamed, her face marking terror unmistakable. Get away! They'll take you. Their choices were becoming frighteningly limited. The darkness surged, a relentless tide crashing against their makeshift stand. In her gut, Sarah knew they were running out of time. A surge of desperate strength flooded through her as horror twisted into resolve. We can't stop. We can't back down. With furious screams still erupting, they pressed forward, the light within grasp growing brighter as shadows shrank back with angry howls. But the union around her evaporated as the darkness made its final bid to reclaim its prey. Hold on! Jacob cried, launching himself towards the emerging figures, trying to salvage the lost to free them from the tightening grip of the darkness. Jacob, no! But her warning was swallowed whole as the shadows lunged forward, ready to swallow him whole again. With every ounce of strength, she lunged after him, heart pounding fiercely, fear clawing at her throat. What was this space where hope flickered yet fear loomed larger? A deafening roar erupted, a piercing cry of anguish that left Sarah breathless. Just as she reached for Jacob, he turned towards her, fear swirling in his eyes. Sarah. And in that heartbeat, she realized it was not just her fight against the darkness anymore, it was a race against time, against the shadows that were ready to devour everything, including the very souls fighting alongside her. Would they find salvation, or would despair cast its final shroud? In the madness, a truth lurked beneath the chaos, a stark realization. The specter had revealed a wicked game, one that forced them to face fears deeper than they had ever imagined. What more would they sacrifice to save the ones they loved? And if they fought and lost, would they all become the next thralls? Time hung in the balance, waiting for their next move. Sarah's heart raced as panic engulfed her. She stretched one trembling hand toward Jacob, feeling the cold breath of the shadows at her back like ice against her skin. It was all coming together, the taunts of the darkness, the distorted faces emerging, twisting her world into chaos. "Jacob, I'm so close!" she yelled, desperation coating each syllable, echoing in the mass of swirling despair. Just when she thought she could grasp his hand, the darkness surged forward, snaking around him with renewed vigor, like a monstrous, hungry beast. He was fading, his body swallowed by the shadows. No! Sarah's scream cut through the cacophony. How could she let go? She couldn't. But what power did they really have to fight this? The specter laughed, a sound so chilling it felt like ice flowing through her veins. "You think you can save him?" The crowd, which had drawn so much strength just moments earlier, faltered, their shouts transformed into stunned silence. Was this the end? Would they really let fear win? Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Sarah's eye, a young girl, probably no more than 10, stepping forward from the crowd. "I want to help," she shouted, her voice steady against the storm of fear. That spark ignited something deep within Sarah. "We need you," she cried, and she could see others beginning to nod, reinvigorated by the girl's courage. "Everyone, join hands," Sarah commanded. "Focus your energy. Fear one to win." Shaky hands extended, fingers intertwined as they formed a chain of desperation and unity. There was strength in numbers, and they had to believe in that. The darkness writhed, its tendrils thrashing like a frenzied serpent. "You are all fools," it hissed, but Sarah felt a shift. Whispered words and silent thoughts surged through the group like a pulse, their fears, their dreams, all condensing into one blazing point of light in the center of their circle. Together. Sarah's voice rang out, and the crowd answered, their collective strength igniting. "Fight! We can beat this! We will shine!" Power surged through them as faces began to glow, flickering like candlelight in a storm. The shadows recoiled, clinging to Jacob, desperately trying to consume him. They were fighting against an enemy that thrived on doubt, an enemy that thrived on their darkest fears. Sarah felt the warmth from the girl beside her, a fragile hope surrounded by a chilling darkness. She grabbed the girl's hand tightly, using that spark to channel more energy into the collective force. Words poured from her as though they were conjured, "We are not here to die. We are fighting for life." A deep rumbling shook the warehouse, the air thick with a tension that threatened to explode at any moment. For a moment, a flicker of light pierced the darkness, illuminating sickening faces twisted in torment that merged with fear and sorrow, a grotesque tapestry of their deepest regrets. "Jacob!" she shouted once more, unable to hold back the fear of losing him forever. But beneath that, something else ignited, a sense of purpose. It seeped through their fingers like the warmth of sunlight breaking through the clouds. But the darkness was relentless. The growls intensified into a deafening roar, infusing the air with suffocating dread. The shadows tightened around Jacob, dragging him deeper into an abyss of torment. "You will be mine," it growled, claws of despair scraping against the walls of their unity. In that moment of essence and agony, Sarah felt something shift within herself, a decision to confront this monstrous force head-on. "I won't lose you," she shouted to Jacob. "You're not giving up. Fight with me." A ripple of defiance flowed through the crowd, each voice joining Sarah's cry of resolve. The shadows began to retreat, teetering on the precipice of fear that they themselves inflicted. But then, just as hope seemed to spill forth, the darkness coiled back, thicker and darker than before. It slammed against their barrier like a freight train, and those closest stumbled, their light flickering. "No. We must hold," Sarah pleaded, but deep inside, doubt clawed at her heart. The darkness wasn't just a shadow, it was a creature that fed on weakness, and it was hungry. As the inferno of despair raged, the warehouse trembled, shaking in time with her heartbeat. The air hung thick with dread, the surface of unity cracking under pressure. Amidst the maelstrom, she glimpsed a figure among the writhing shadows, familiar but twisted, a reflection of her nightmares. Sarah, it breathed, a voice she instantly recognized as her own whispering fears. "You can't win, it feasts on your failures." Her heart teetered. Could she truly defeat something birthed from her own psyche? Or was it too late to escape the curse of the darkness? "Look away. Look!" Sarah shouted to the others, forcing herself not to gaze at her own tormentor. But just before she lost focus, something flashed behind the specter, a glimpse of warmth amidst the dark. Was it a trick? Or was salvation truly within reach? As shadows pressed closer, she realized she had to face what it meant to fight for life. Could they stand stronger together, or was that light nothing but a fading illusion? The moment teetered, suspended on the brink between salvation and despair, waiting for the next move. The shadows twisted tighter around Jacob, dragging him into their chilling embrace, a desperate struggle between hope and despair unfolding in the air. Sarah felt the weight of dread crushing her chest, every breath a reminder of the darkness invading her very soul. The crowd around her was wavering, eyes wide with fear as the specter continued to spawn their greatest fears. She couldn't lose faith now. "Concentrate!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the thickening fog of hopelessness. "We're stronger together. Let us not let it take him." In the flickering light of their collective determination, she could see Jacob's silhouette, his face contorted in anguish, caught between reality and nightmare. Her heart fractured at the sight. The darkness, sensing a shift in energy, hissed in fury, its voice thicker than before, swirling like a tempest. "Foolish mortals! You know nothing of true despair." The specter threw words like daggers, aiming for the cracks forming in their unity. "You only prolong the inevitable." Suddenly, Sarah felt the 10-year-old girl beside her squeeze her hand tighter, knuckles bone white. "I'm scared," she whispered, a tremor of doubt seeping into the girl's courageous tone. "Fear is a choice." Sarah shot back, wishing she could shield the child from the terror creeping closer. "We have to turn it into something powerful. We are the light." But as the shadows writhed in response, she felt the power of their unity start to splinter. The darkness roared again, louder this time, a cacophony that rattled the very bones of the warehouse, threatening to drown out the light they were trying so hard to maintain. Panic spread among the crowd. Shouts of fear morphed into cries of despair as shadows latched onto ankles and wrists, pulling some into the dark. "Help!" a man screamed. "Get them off me!" The urgency was infectious. Others stumbled backward, breaking the chain, their illumination dimming. "Focus! Don't break!" Sarah shouted desperately. But the darkness wrapped around them like an anaconda, squeezing tighter, stifling hope. "Sarah," echoed the twisted reflection of her own voice, mocking her. "Is this who you are? A coward? You have no power here." She forced herself to breathe through the rising panic. Was it true? Hadn't she always been afraid to look her fears in the eye? But she couldn't let this nightmare feed off her suffering. Her love for Jacob flared bright and vivid in her mind, igniting a flicker of strength amidst the suffocating darkness. "Everyone, fight back. Channel your fear into strength." She roared, squeezing the girl's hand harder, anchoring her own strength to the child's vulnerability. "Think of your loved ones. Think of what you'd lose." The crowd hesitated, but then, one by one, they began to chant, their trembling voices harmonizing into a chorus of defiance against the encroaching shadows. "We will not be afraid." Suddenly, the shadows recoiled slightly, as if the combined will was pushing against the darkness. Jacob's silhouette flickered, and for a moment, clarity broke through the chaos like a beacon cutting through dense fog. "Fight! You're not alone." Jacob forced out, his voice strained, becoming a rallying cry. That ignited something fierce within Sarah. She summoned every ounce of courage she had and shouted, "Light, shine brighter. Don't let it take our dreams." The pressure of the shadows eased slightly as renewed resolve filled the air, but just as Sarah felt a moment of reprieve, a chilling gust swept through, sending her hair whipping against her face. The spectre laughed, a deep, throaty sound reverberating through the warehouse walls. "Do you truly believe you can escape your own fears? You're merely feeding me." It lunged forward, darkness crashing against their makeshift barrier, slashing through the connection as souls in the crowd faltered. Every echoing laugh felt like a dagger, each taunt a reminder of their vulnerability. The shadows thickened again, threatening to swallow every last light source. In a frenzied rush, Sarah looked for anything that could provide insight, a clue. Or a weapon. That's when she noticed something glinting behind the spectre, something pure, vibrant, and laden with hope, but it was so far beyond her reach. "Jacob!" Sarah shouted above the rising tempest of despair, her voice barely breaking through the chaos. "The light, we have to find a way to it." But as she glanced back at the group, she saw their faces twisted in fear, doubt creeping into every eye. Was this battle worth it? Was hope just another layer of darkness waiting to fall? As shadows clawed their way closer, Sarah realized that some battles required more than sheer will. They required sacrifice. Suddenly, the girl she held tightly cried out, "I'll help. I'll take it." "No. You can't." Sarah gasped, grasping at the child, but the girl's determination burned brighter than ever. And then, without warning, the girls stepped forward, breaking their connected chain entirely. "Trust me," she cried. And just like that, she dashed into the choking shadows, a glint of light disappearing into the darkness. A gasp swept through the crowd, but it faded into silence. Sarah felt her heart pound chaotically. Could they lose another? In that moment, a single spark ignited the air. The darkness hesitated, then surged again, more furious than before. Would the girl's sacrifice be in vain? Shadows slashed toward Sarah, ready to consume her. She had just moments to make a decision. Face her fears and fight, or let despair swallow them all. What was waiting in the darkness, beyond the girl's brave sacrifice? Would Sarah uncover the secret that promised salvation, or was she destined to become another lost soul? As the shadows closed in on Jacob and Sarah, a palpable tension gripped the air. It was as if time itself had bated breath. The crowd, now scattered and fragile, felt the suffocating weight of despair while the dark spectre brandished its cruel laughter like a weapon. The flicker of hope ignited by the girl's sacrifice lingered in the air, hauntingly beautiful yet dreadfully uncertain. Would it be enough? "Fight!" Jacob's voice rang out again, strained yet determined. "We can't let fear win." Sarah felt that drive course through her like fire, igniting every fiber of her being as she pushed against the encroaching darkness. Even in this moment of chaos and despair, she refused to let go of the flickering light that danced in her heart. One by one, faces in the crowd began to yield again to courage. Together, they joined Sarah's chant, their voices harmonizing like a fragile symphony against the menacing storm. The shadows recoiled ever so slightly, as if jolted back by their unity. Seeing this momentary retreat ignited fresh determination. There was power within their connection. "Do not break," Sarah bellowed, reaching beyond the fear that gripped her heart. She could almost feel the spark of the girl's courage extending to her, wrapping around her like a shield. As she focused on the light that glimmered at the very edge of her vision, she urged from her gut, "Channel that energy. Let us push it away together." The darkness hissed, furious that the spectre of despair was losing its grip. You think your bonds can withstand eternity? You'll face the consequences. It shrieked, its sinister voice clawing at the edges of their resolve. Fueled by indignation and love, the mingled cries surged in intensity. The shadows began to convulse, pushing back against their unity. It was deafening. Fear reared up again, each cry threatening their formation as the shadows lunged like a ravenous beast. But Sarah held strong, her hands steady, fingers entwined with Jacob's, as others rallied behind them, desperate souls intertwined, hearts beating as one. Keep it together, now. Jacob shouted, raising their linked hands as if crafting a collective beacon. Remember why you're here. We fight for each other. In that electrifying moment of clarity, Sarah's heart expanded. She could almost see the girl's bravery stitched into the fabric of their efforts, feel it bolstering their resolve. Fight for your loved ones. Fight for life. She roared, and the unity of voices crescendoed into a furious battle cry. Just as the shadows lunged again, aiming to consume their strength, the crowd screamed back, a surge of light illuminating the dark like a thunderclap. Sarah's heart raced, she felt an overwhelming rush of warmth enveloping her, a surge of energy ignited by their collective anger against the darkness that threatened their very existence. The shadows twisted, recoiling violently, shrinks of malevolence chasing away from the blinding light. No. The spectre howled, its voice filled with fear. You cannot prevail. But the truth rang loud and clear. Their fears were real, but so was their courage. Pushing through, Sarah let her heart guide her, reaching toward Jacob as the darkness parted like a curtain. Her fingers brushed against his, and with one deep breath, she grasped tighter, pulling him forward, fighting against the shadow's grasp. Together. She shouted once more, as a brilliant burst of light exploded at their center, bathing the warehouse in white-hot illumination that dispelled the shadows into wisps of curling smoke. The air felt lighter, freeing them from the suffocating grip of despair. As the darkness began to collapse, the shadows erupted into whispers, ceasing their grasp on the crowd, hastily retreating as they fled back into the recesses of the warehouse. Spectres' cries of fury echoed, fading into nothingness. Cheers erupted, vibrant and piercing, reflecting a triumphant roar of survival. Sarah, heart pounding, cradled Jacob's face between her palms, searching his eyes, ensuring he was truly there. We did it, she breathed, a swell of emotion sweeping through her. Yes, he gasped, glancing around as the remaining light flickered, brightening the faces of the once cursed. The collective gasp of relief washed over the crowd, uniting them all in a newfound sense of purpose. They were alive, unbroken, their spirits soaring higher than the shroud of despair that had once threatened to consume them. Hand in hand, they stepped through the remaining dark remnants, one last spectre clawing at their ankles before it dissolved, an echo of a nightmare now fast fading into memory. Remember this, Jacob spoke softly, his grip tightening around Sarah's hand. We found connection even in despair. When shadows threaten, we unite. As the last of the darkness dissolved, a newfound light illuminated the warehouse, revealing warm, inviting faces, those who had fought together against their fears. The oppressive weight lingering over them faded, replaced with a sense of hope. They were no longer victims of a game, they had transformed into a community, bound by courage and choice. With hopeful hearts, Sarah glanced toward the exit, a world waiting to embrace them beyond the threshold. They stepped into the light together, ready to carry this newfound strength forward, refusing to let fear dictate their lives any longer. As they marched out, hand in hand, towards a dawn set afire with new possibilities, one truth remained: whenever darkness looms, they now knew what it meant to fight together for the light. Their stories, their connections, and their courage would breathe life into their world anew. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that are waiting just for you. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, make a difference, and show your support. And don't forget to flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories about this shocking conclusion. Plus, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.